All right.
Cool. Let's go and talk about airspace.
All right.
So as a private pilot, is there any type of airspace you are not allowed to fly into?
Alpha.
Who is allowed to fly into Class Alpha?
IFR. Or anybody instrument rated.
Yeah. So you showed me your cross-country flight plan going from John Wayne up to beautiful Bakersfield.
Yeah.
So on that flight, you're going to have to transition through a couple different types of airspace, or at least avoid it. So let's take a look at a VFR sectional. So looking at our departure airport right here, what kind of airspace is this?
Charlie.
Yeah. So what are the general dimensions for Charlie airspace?
So usually the surface up to 4,000. You have to contact approach within 20 nautical miles of it. And that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Right? That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So dimensions, and then you have to, so that when you come in contact with clearance, when you come in contact with approach, what do we usually refer to that as? What type of communication?
Two-way communications.
Yep. So you'll need to establish two-way communication. And then these numbers right here, what does that mean?
So that's the shelf. So the shelf for our Charlie goes from the surface to 4,400 in the general area of the airport. And then we also have shelves on the outside as well.
Right. And then, yeah, talking about those outer shelves. See if I can move this. Right there. So at what altitude does this shelf start?
2,000.
And up to what altitude?
4,400.
Yep. So let's take a look at,
I just realized these two are 5,400.
yeah. So this red circle here at the top, what is that?
So it's a TFR, temporary flight restriction. So for Disney in that area, it is a permanent temporary flight restriction.
Right.
We just can't fly through it without proper clearance, or at least establishing like our communications with ATC to allow us to fly over it or in it.
Right. So what are some, I guess, usually some reasons why a TFR would be established?
So in that case, like Disneyland, and there's also the Angel Stadium. So a stadium, the president could be coming in, firefighting activity, or just any sort of like VIP thing that's kind of happening in the area.
Yep. So after departure, zoom in here. So you're going to go westbound, and then you come across this blue dashed line. What is that referring to?
This one.
Yep.
So that is a Delta airspace.
Yep. And what are some dimensions for Class Delta?
Usually it's just surrounding the general airport and just extending up to whatever the next shelf of airspace is.
Yeah. So usually there's a typical number.
Is there?
Yeah. So it goes from surface up to a certain altitude, if you just want to double check.
That's Charlie Delta. Oh, surface to 2,500 above the airport elevation, charted in MSL. So for us, we're at sea level, so just 2,500 above. Okay.
All right. So that 25 right there, what does that mean?
So that's surface to 2,500.
Right.
So if you're above that, then you're out of the delta. But if you're inside of that, then you're within it.
And what would you need before entering that airspace?
Two-way communications as well.
Right. So let's travel along here a little bit. So now these solid blue lines, what is that referring to?
A Bravo.
Right. And what are usually the dimensions for Class Bravo?
Class Bravo typically extends from the surface to 10,000 above the airport's elevation. So in our case, sea level to 10,000.
Right. And any equipment or communication requirements before entering that?
So you need to establish two-way radio communications. You need a clearance, and it needs needs to have your call sign and actually get cleared into the Bravo.
Yeah.
You also need Mode C capability, and that's it.
Yeah. So you don't need you mentioned two-way communication, you don't need that, but clearance you do.
Clearance, yeah.
Difference between those two is that clearance, like you said, you need to hear you're cleared to enter the class Bravo.
Yeah.
Two-way communication is they say your tail number.
Yeah. Yeah, because even if they say like 916 Romeo Romeo stand by, like you still can't go in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But if
so-
it's Charlie, then you're good. Yeah.
All right. These magenta arrows, what is that referring to?
So that's the VFR corridor, like route that you're allowed to fly within that Bravo.
Right. And where can you find out more specifics about that?
So that would be in the VFR flyway chart for that specific Bravo. So for us, like on a tack, if we had like a paper tack, just fold it onto the one side, it'll give you everything you need to about the VFR corridors.
Yep. And then if you are operating within the LAX class Bravo airspace, are you allowed to perform special VFR?
Are you allowed to perform special VFR?
Yep.
Let me double check.
I'll give you a hint. It's right there.
No special VFR. Oh. Special flight rules is different than special. Yeah, that's right. Okay. No special VFR. Didn't know that. So in Bravos you can't, or is that just specific to the airport?
It's specific to the airport.
Oh, okay.
They actually have a list in here too, the Bravo airspace that don't allow it. Cool. So going through that class Bravo, what would be the VFR weather minimums while you're going through that airport?
3 statute miles and just clear clouds.
Right. So why do you think there's a difference between, the 3-152 rule versus 3 clear clouds?
Typically because of Bravos are a lot busier and they just want to funnel traffic through, especially because of IFR traffic.
Yep. It's more controlled, and so you can get closer to clouds
Yeah.
in that sense. All right. Just quick look at Camarillo. Can you tell me a little bit about this airport?
So Camarillo, the code for the airport is Charlie Mike Alpha. Control tower's frequency is 128.2. The CTAF is also the same thing, ATIS 126.025. The elevation for the airport is 77 feet. It is a partially, lighted operations are like partially there. Like they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they're on during the day, but they're not on at like night, past the hours that the airport is closed. The longest runway, the one runway, 6,000 feet. 122.95. I want to say is Unicom, and for runway 8, it's a right pattern.
And what would this star mean right there?
Let's see. The star indicates operations part-time. Yeah.
So you got 3 stars. You got that one next to tower,
Yep.
which you're right, operation part-time. And then lighting limitations, got that one, and then there's another star right there.
It's not beacon, because beacon is that one.
That's a good question. So you're correct. This one is beacon, and that means something else.
The VOR. The VOR.
Yep.
The VOR's location.
All right, let's say you completely miss Bakersfield. Let's say it's foggy. For whatever reason, you're going to need to divert.
Yeah.
And you find yourself at Paso Robles right here.
Yep.
What airspace would this airport be?
Paso Robles would be. So it's magenta. Dash magenta, wouldn't that be golf? Echo? Dash magenta, echo, yeah, dash magenta is echo.
Yep.
Yeah, so Paso Robles would be an echo airspace.
Yep. At what altitude does that echo start?
So echo would be starting at surface. So start at the surface. It's not 700. Surface to 7. No.
Surface until it hits something, basically.
Just until it hits something right above. So in this instance, it would just be surface to, because there's nothing above it.
Nope.
So it would just be to flight level 180.
Right. So if you find yourself north of the field over here, at what altitude would echo start?
That would be 700. Yeah. Because
then-
above that, that's golf, or below that is golf.
Right. And then just north of that, at what altitude would echo start?
1200?
Yep.
Yeah.
So what would be the VFR weather minimums for this airport?
It would just be 3152, 3 statute miles, 1 above, 5 below, and 2,000 across.
Now back to the section over here. So let's say you're flying at 2,000 feet within this section. For daytime, what would be the VFR weather minimums?
So at 2,000,
Yeah, flying at 2,000 feet.
2,000. So you're still in echo. Same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's say you're below that. So if it starts at 700 feet and for whatever reason you're only at 500 feet, what would be the VFR weather minimums?
So that's golf now. Wouldn't that just be 1 statute mile clear clouds?
Yep. Now, if it's dark, so it's nighttime, what would be the weather minimums then?
At 500? 3152.
Yep.
So yeah, 3152.
Yep. Gets a little, so it gets a little more restrictive.
Yeah. Isn't there one that's like 5 miles? Oh yeah, echo, no, golf, more than 1200.
So looking at the VORTAC over here, can you communicate with a flight service station using those frequencies?
Yes, you can. So you could tune in, so this would be Hawthorne flight service, and you can speak on 122.4. And there's not like an R, so you can talk to them on there, and you know, they'll receive that and they can speak back with you.
Right. And this frequency, can you hear them on that frequency?
I want to say yeah. No, because that's just the VOR frequency.
Right.
So yeah,
So how can you tell?
the dash line underneath.
Yep. So it's underlined, no voice.
Yeah.
All right, you accidentally make a left turn. You end up in this area over here. This says MOA. What does that refer to?
So a MOA is a military operating area. So we're not restricted to not fly through it, but it's definitely an area that we need to be cautious of and at least just kind of talk with the controlling agency, just make sure that nothing's actually happening and we're safe to fly through it.
And then little blue area above that, what does that refer to?
So restricted area, VFR is allowed to fly through it as long as it is cold. So you can ask them if it's hot and cold. Cold meaning nothing's happening. Hot is active. And if it's hot, then obviously don't fly through it.
Right. So where can you find the dimensions for this airspace, this restricted airspace?
So on the sectional, it would show up on the back side of it. You could just look for the exact restricted number. And so in this case, it would be Alpha and Bravo, so 2504. Look it up, check to see what the altitude is, the bottom and the top, and just kind of go from there. And then it can also tell you like who controls that as well, so you can contact them to ask.
So this blue number right here, what is that referring to?
So that's the minimum elevation figure. So in that specific quadrant on your chart, that's like the highest point at which there's an obstacle or peak of some kind, and in the event of like some emergency, as long as you're above it, then you're not going to hit it or anything like that.
Right. So is that a restriction? Meaning if you're in that quadrant, you have to fly above that?
Not necessarily, no. Just kind of be cautious that there's something around that altitude.
Yeah. Cool. So that's all I have for you, and then we'll go on to performance and limitations.
Okay.